You know what, that's a 30-inch wide tank. I'd be better served with 6 175s and spreading them out. Having multiple light sources, hopefully not as much shading, having light coming from different directions. You can also mix and match the bulbs a lot easier, play with the colors if you wanted to. I'm sure other people have preached to you about light rails and moving the light source around more like the sun is, coming up and over. The market has spoken. We aren't buying them. Nobody wants those things. I mean, they look neat on the tank when you first see them, but then after a while, it's like, lights moving back and forth all the time, and it's just not visually appealing. And like I said, the market just dictates it. It might be the best thing for your corals possible, but, who in here has a light rail? Anybody? One guy. One guy in a room of 150, 200. It's a neat toy and a neat trick, and I'd love to see one that moved across set to time. Now, instead of it moving back every 10 minutes or whatever, one that actually took 10 hours to move across like the sun. It'd be cool. It'd be a neat dramatic effect, but when you brought your in-laws over or your friends or whatever, they'd be like, "Why is one half of your tank dark?" So it's just not going to take long, probably. So again, general opinions, anything under 90 gallons, I'm totally sold on T5s or some of the better LEDs out there. Anything over 180, not that you couldn't light a tank with LEDs, but I'm not going to spend that kind of money in an initial investment. The payoff time is just too far out there for me. Especially those big deep dimensions and things like that. Those big lumen style reflectors are just so efficient, and generally on those bigger tanks too, you can deal with the heat. Smaller tanks I can make a much stronger argument for LEDs for, because they don't throw any heat down towards the water. And I think that's everything. I think I talked about the lower Kelvin, and things like those Reef bright ones with the LEDs. That's a perfect example. You can use 175s in there and just flood it with LEDs to get the color you want. So save yourself some watts, save yourself some money, and think about what you're buying before you go with whatever the miscellaneous guy on the internet recommends for you. The 400 watts over your 90. You don't know who you're talking to. A guy who lives in his basement with his parents and spends all his time playing World of Warcraft and answering Reef questions. There's some real jokers out there. I think Scott wrote about it before, about bad advice at the local fish store and bad advice online. It's an equal split to me. I've seen some real suspect advice online too. So not that I haven't been lied to at a local pet store, but so educate yourself, take a look out there. Sanjay's got a ton of data. Dana Riddle also has a good amount of data out there as well. Even get a par meter yourself and look at some of the things yourself. It's not that difficult. Yes?
What makes the T5 overdrive less wattage than the T5 non-overdrive?
It's really not in total wattage. It was when I talked about like an overdriven on a 90 again, it would be about 4 tubes would provide you enough light in my experience to grow most things. That's 4 times 80, which is 320 watts. So if you had 6 standard T5 HO bulbs, 6 times 54 is 324. So it's pretty much the same amount of watts, it's less bulbs. At the end of the day, it's about the same amount of money, because you may save a little bit in end caps and reflectors and bulbs every time you relamp, but you're probably going to have to relamp more often. The overdriven is closer to 9 months than 12. So again, it's a toss-up. Yes?
So one of the things I'm still missing is there a published reference for what par value is ideal in a tank? Right?
No.
You can get to 100, or
he was asking about the ideal par level in a tank.
Get to 1,000, right?
There's really not a lot of good data out there. Dana Riddle did some things on par with corals, and when they basically were saturated with light, when no more light did any more good to them. When you actually overlight them, it's called photo inhibition, but it's very species dependent. And quite frankly, there's some 400 or so species of acros alone. There's no big table out there that we could look at, and even if you could, you're really not. Again, a little pet peeve of mine. 400 species of acro, and you'll see every single acro you see for sale identified a species level. made up. Just make up names if you want to. No one here's busting out the microscope to ID them, so it's just nonsense. But
there must be a target, right?
Range, 100 par at the bottom of your tank is going to be plenty sufficient to keep anything down there. About 100 is where I would aim for on the bottom of your tank. You could go higher if you really wanted to, just really certain things. And there's certain things that require, even though like I'm big on trying to save yourself, I mean like the big Magnifica anemones, or I don't know what they're really called now, they changed their names again. But those big guys that crawl right up on the top, I mean I've seen them under 400 watts sticking out of the water. They're crazy light hungry. Most of the stuff we keep isn't. I've seen more than my fair share of stuff kept under very modest level T5s, 170, metal halides. A lot of it's business. The 250 watt ballast doesn't cost hardly any more than the 175. The 400 is only a couple bucks more. So everybody buys buy the 400. It's only 20 bucks more. It's really not. Go outside and watch your watt meter spin. You'll see how much more it is over the course of a year. Unless you really like supporting your public utility. Be careful about what you buy. Make sure it goes with what you're wanting to keep.
And when I'm looking at power,
yes,
it's huge.
That's labeled watts. Everything I talked about was labeled watts, not actual draw. Like for instance, a lot of the 250 watt magnetic ballasts draw 320 watts or something like that, actual draw out of the wall. So I just used the numbers on the bulbs, just kept it generic. A lot of that stuff's pretty accurate. The fluorescents are pretty accurate. The metal halides, if it's electronic metal halide ballast, it's pretty accurate. But if it's a magnetic metal halide, it's all over the place. Anything else? Well, thank you all for coming. I hope you didn't buy raffle tickets, because I think they were pulling raffle tickets the whole time I was talking. So, but thank you all for listening to me.